Yo guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Future Fight Lounge, and today I'm going to be doing a very different kind of video because recently on Twitch and in my chat I've been having a lot of new players come into the game, and they've been asking me questions about building characters and some of the things that they should do, and I've been having to tell them some of the big things that they shouldn't be doing. And so I thought I would make a video out there because as far as I can tell there's not one updated for 2020 at the minute. So here's going to be my take on a basic guide to building characters. Now, this is going to be the first part in a guide that I hope is going to be a beginner's guide as far as 2020 goes, to helping new people, even not characters, new people get into the game and, make sure they're doing some of the right things. So yeah, for our example today, we're going to be using Cosmic Ghost Rider. He's from last video, so the build hasn't changed, I promise. And so yeah, we're just going to be talking about stats, some of the key ones, how gear works and how you should be focusing on that, how ISO weight works, which is a big thing that people have seen messing up with, and how uniforms are working. So yeah, without further ado, let's go into it. Okay guys, so we're going to be starting off by looking at stats and what stats you should probably be focusing on getting up. So as far as stats goes, some of the main stats that are mostly very important in the game is the reduced cooldown duration and ignore defense. I would say are the two most important stats that you should probably be focusing on. So first thing that you should do is you should get yourself into a level 30 alliance to get yourself that extra 14% skill cooldown, and try and get at least 30% of skill cooldown on your cards. You can work with 20, but 30% is ideal. You want to be able to cap out cooldown duration on all your characters just to make sure that all of their cooldowns are cut in half so you can get your rotations off a lot faster than you would be doing. Next up is ignore defense, which is a super important stat due to the fact that it allows your characters to hit harder as it's taking away some of the opponent's defenses, and obviously they're just ignoring it. By the way, that's not actually how that works. That's just an easy way to explain it. Next up, we have crit rate and crit damage and dodge. Now, the reason I have dodge maxed out on Cosmic Ghost Rider is because he's a character that I use for ABX. Now, if you're going to be focusing on ABX, you should have, most characters should have a CTP of Rage, but we'll go more into that in a minute. The reason we cap dodge out for that is because it's one of the main stats that's needed for that. Crit rate and crit damage and attack speed, though, are the main stats that you should be looking at for the rest of your characters that aren't just on a basic level. You want to make sure that you have crit rate and crit damage pretty high, but you also want to be keeping your ignore defense 50%. So if you can have your crit rate at 60% and your crit damage at 180%, then that is fine. Please note, though, the attack speed maxes out at 130%, crit rate maxes out at 75%, as you can see, and crit damage maxes out at 200%. So ideally you want 180 for crit damage, 60 for crit rate, I would say, and 125 is okay for attack speed. Just if your characters are feeling pretty slow, though, I would definitely recommend bumping the attack speed up, as it is a pretty important stat. As far as anything else goes, you mostly get fire damage, cold damage, any other elemental kind of damage. You mostly will get those from leaderships, supports, buffs, anything like that. So that's not too important to have on your character. Resists, you don't really want many resists on your characters. If you're having most of these higher than, say, 10%, obviously this is acceptable because he's getting increased fire resist from just his abilities. But you see how I have 12% poison resist? That's a bad stat. That is coming from my cards, which is not great. So if I have 12% poison resist, that means I'm losing 12% that could be split somewhere else. As far as gear is basically where you will be getting most of the stats from your character. Now, as you can see, my Ghost Rider's gear isn't maxed out. It could be. The max level for gear when you hit level 70 with a character is 25, and when you hit level 60 with a character, the max level you can get is level 20, which is ideally what most of your characters should have. This is where you'll get the bulk of your stats from, and it will be further enhanced by putting Uru's and Odin's Blessings. As a new player, you shouldn't really focus too much on Uru and Odin's Blessings. This is more for like high-level players and people that have been playing the game for a while, but I will give you a basic overview on what they are. Uru is used to further enhance your stats on your characters. So as you can see on Ghost Rider here, I have 2 physical attack stats. So mainly, when you're applying Uru, you want 2 attack Urus on your characters on each of the gears. So as you can see, on all of them, I have at least 2 physical attacks. You want to make sure that you have the Uru of the primary attack stat that your character uses. Even if your character skills say energy, you want to make sure that they don't say have all physical damage. So as we can see here on Red Skull, his attacks say physical, but on his 4th skill it says energy. But if you go further into it, you'll see it says energy damage of physical attack, which means the energy damage dealt is a percentage of his physical attack stat that he has here, which is where the damage is coming from. So if your skills, if your character, say like Caecilius, has energy attack as his primary stat, but that is a physical attack of his energy attack stat, that just means that you want to build up this main attack stat here. As far as the other stats for Cosmic Ghost Rider go, I have a crit rate and a dodge, and then I also have an Odin's Blessing. Now, Odin's Blessings are incredibly powerful. They give more stats than a normal Uru would give, and they are harder to obtain, which is why they give more stats, and they also give more bonus stats. Now, the reason that you see a green stat here is because it is a bonus stat. It is also on the dodge, on the physical attacks, but it won't be on the crit rate. That is because I have these slots amplified. Ideally, when you're playing a character, you want to have at least 4 amplified slots, if not 5. 5 is a lot harder to get, which is why most of the time you want to be going for 4. When you have them enhanced or amplified, you will get an extra bonus, so much of a stat. I will be leaving a link to a photo down below in the description of all of the stats and percentages that you get off of each Uru to help you guys, fine tune those builds of yours eventually when you get to that stage. You can always come back to this video at a later date. As far as obtaining Uru goes, it's a pretty hard, they're not exactly easy to farm, so your best bets are probably from the new Guardians of the Galaxy Epic Quest, from the Punisher and Nebula missions, from just doing your Dimension missions, and if you're at a high enough stage where you don't need any bios from the support shop or the Dimension shop, you should probably go for Uru chests from there. It's a nice way of getting 4 or 5 star Urus. You can also get them from your Alliance tier checking chest. Next up, we have skills. Skills are a massive part of a character and what makes them good and what makes them bad. I'm going to be going over some effects that skills have most commonly and what are good ones and what are bad ones, and we're also going to be going into what iframes are, as iframes are a massive part of the game and what make a character good and bad as well. And if we look at Cosmic Ghost Rider's first skill, you can see it's very plain. Skills like these are normally pretty bad unless they are iframes, which we will look at in a minute. Number 2, you can see, has an apply to enemy, burn damage, and bind. Now, this is mostly going to be a Shadowland effect, as world bosses don't take that stat, as in that effect cannot be applied to them. Now, on his third skill, he has something called Accumulation. Accumulation is great. It makes a character much more powerful and is incredibly powerful to have on a character, which is why most characters that have Accumulation are considered to be pretty good. The reason why this is good is because when this skill is pressed, basically what it's saying is, every time you get hit, the 1% of the damage that you take will increase your damage by 15%, which is super powerful. So it's pretty bonkers when a character has this. He also has 20% recovery. This basically means whenever he uses the skill, he will heal for 20% of his max health. And it also has damage immunity. Damage immunity basically means he will be immune to damage for 5 seconds. But note, this can be penetrated. However, unlike invincibility and a guard hit, it cannot be debuffed. So when you use invincibility, say on Thanos, and he uses his one skill, or in World Boss Ultimate, when he throws those blue orbs at you, it basically means that this won't be taken off. However, when you use a barrier, a guard, or invincibility, it will be debuffed. Immunity cannot be debuffed. As far as fourth skill goes, on fourth, he has decrease all buffs by 50% and duration by 30%. That basically means any buffs that they're going to give themselves won't be as effective by 50%, so they'll basically be half as effective as normal, and they will last for 30% less time. That's not super important, this ability. The main important stat that we're looking at here is 50% decrease all defenses stacks up to 50% and ignores immunity. This stat here is what makes or breaks a character as being good in the game. Defense down is really important in this game. And it's super important for the sole reason of it's a percentage. There are some characters that have it, but not as a percentage. And especially when it says ignores immunity. Ignores immunity basically means that it will apply to World Boss, which is super important. That basically is saying that when this skill is used, it will take all of your enemy's defenses and just cut them in half, meaning that you will almost do double damage. So it's a super important stat to have, and this can be bumped up with certain leaderships, and which is what makes certain strikers really good. Now, all characters in the game will have at least 3 passives. They will have a leadership, which is technically not a passive, but I'm classing it as a passive ability. They will have a 4-star passive, which they get at 4 stars, and they will have a tier 2 passive. Now for Ghost Rider, as you can see, his 4-star passive, which is this one here, Pain Tolerance, decreases skill cooldown by 10%. Some tier 2 passives increase the effect of some characters' 4-star passives, which is super important. His leadership is a 24% increase of all attack. Please note that all attack is very different to singular attacks such as physical and energy. So that is something to note. And for his tier 2 passive, he has 15% ignore defense and ignores target dodge rate by 35%. Now in normal circumstances, this would be considered a not great tier 2 passive. However, considering he has accumulation or defense down and iframes, this is what makes him such a bonkers character. Okay. So next up, we're going to go into skills and the preview skill to show you guys what iframes are. An iframe in this game is what's known as an invincibility frame, which basically means while your character uses that skill, they are unhittable. And there are very few skills in the game that can like pull you out of your iframe or touch you while you're in iframe. Now, how to know if your character has an iframe? You will see a circle on them that has a red X inside of them. So when we do his 1 skill, as you can see there, he has an X on him, which basically means he cannot be hit while he uses this skill. His 2 skill has it at the beginning, but not at the end. His 4th skill does not have one, and his 5th skill has a delayed one, but is super long when it comes in. So for the entire duration of this, it is an iframe. Another way to tell if your character has an iframe is, as you can see, I'm getting hit. Okay, they are shooting at me, which means they are hitting. As soon as I go into an iframe, as you can see, they stop shooting at me. I'll do it again with the 1 skill. As you can see, they're shooting at me. But as soon as I do my 1 skill, they stop shooting at me, which basically means they can't hit me. Same for the 5th skill, as you can see. But the 4th skill and the 3rd skill are not iframes because, as you can see, when you do his 4th skill, they're still able to hit me. He stopped shooting next. So they still shoot at me while I do the 4th skill. And for the 5th skill, they still shoot at me. Now, when I said damage accumulation before, as we were talking about in the skill preview, not skill preview, but like looking at the skills, you can see here, when it comes up, we have this symbol here. A little sword and the half, like, segmented bubble around it. Damage accumulation of damage taken in. There's another version of this called damage accumulation of damage dealt, as you can see on Magneto when he has his uniform from the Marvel Now, and he does his 5th skill. So when we do it to him, as you can see, when we do his 5th, it is here, accumulate damage of damage dealt. So that basically means the more damage he deals, the more damage he is going to deal. So it's kind of like you're hitting hard, and because you're hitting hard, you want to hit hard. Moving on, we have Type Enhancement. Type Enhancement is mainly something that you want to use when you're going into building a character for PvP, and it basically just increases the skill alinity triangle, which basically means as a universal type, obviously he has increased to all other types. So it will just increase this stat here. So if we move along to Red Skull, as you can see, he is max level, and he is getting a bonus 30% damage dealt to combat types and an extra 15% reduced damage taken from combat types. Now, as a beginner player, you should probably know, but as you know, blasts are stronger against combat types are stronger against speed types, and speed types are stronger against blast types, and universal are just stronger against all types. Moving on to ISO 8, I would say we're moving on to one of the biggest, if not the biggest, part of building a character and what makes them good and bad. Now, as far as setting an ISO 8 set for your character, I would strongly say that at least 90% of the characters in the game should have an ISO 8 set from either Power of Angry Hulk or Overdrive are by far the 2 best ISO 8 sets in the game. You should probably not be going for anything other than ISO 8 sets. There are 8 sets, so like ones of 8, which you don't have from the very beginning, but you will unlock as you level up your character. But you strongly want to be going for 8 set ISO 8s. It's a mouthful, okay? That's why I'm kind of struggling with it. Now, a thing that I see people doing is I see them using tacticians because they think that it just applies to the type of character that you're using. Now, tactician or tactician ISO 8 sets are known to be pretty bad as they don't give too much usefulness. As it's just decreasing skill cooldown, it's pretty useless. Healers are okay for certain characters, but obviously, again, wouldn't recommend it. Obviously, you always want to be using offensive. Now, the reason I didn't mention Hawk's Eye is probably best used when you don't have very much cooldown on your cards, or you don't have very much cooldown on a character in general, as it gives cooldown as an extra stat. Now, the reason you might want to pick Power of Angry Hulk over Overdrive is because you're lacking in crit damage, which is the other way around. You want to pick Overdrive over Power of Angry Hulk if you're lacking in crit damage, because Overdrive has crit damage. As we can see, Power of Angry Hulk has attack speed instead, which again is super important, but both of them do have ignore defense, which helps build that up on your characters. Moving on to the second to last, we have custom gear. Custom gear is super important, and it defines a character from being good and from being bad. So this is kind of a very important thing. Now, as you can see on my Ghost Rider here, I have a CTP of Rage. This is because I use him in ABX, and this is probably the best custom gear you want to have, or the CTP you want to have for ABX characters. Now on this, you can see on most custom gears, you have two primary stats, or a primary and a secondary, and then you have an effect stat. Now for a CTP of Rage, not that most beginner players will have this, but I will just explain it anyway. This is basically saying that 20% of the time when you're dealing a critical attack, so that means you want to have a higher crit rate so that you can proc this more, you will apply to yourself a 0.9 damage increase per 1% of your dodge rate and your crit rate, which is saying that you will increase your damage by 75% times 2, which I think is 135 if I'm not mistaken. So it will be a flat 135% damage increase to all of your skills all over while this is procced, which is basically saying that it helps you score a lot higher, is the point I'm trying to make. It's just a flat-out damage boost that you get for 5 seconds. And then ignores bosses damage decrease by 60% is pretty important as well as a stat. And the cooldown is 7 seconds. Most custom gears have this. And just to give you guys a rundown on all the other CTPs you want to use, I'll give you a brief overview as to who they should be used on. CTP of Authority is mostly a PvP-based CTP, so you want to use like characters that 1, don't have guard break, and 2, have a heal and preferably invincibility, basically saying that as soon as they have this, when they get hit, and they're below, it's mostly at 50%, but when you hit 50% health, it has damage accumulation, so basically gives any character damage accumulation. CTP of Energy, you want to use on characters that have high hit count skills. So for example is Cable, and his 5th skill, as soon as this procs, his damage spikes. That is because it also has chain damage increase as well as a damage proc. CTP of Destruction is mostly a hybrid CTP, as it has guard break, penetration, and also a damage proc, so it can be used on characters you want to use maybe in both scenarios, i.e. a lot of people like to put a CTP of Destruction on Captain Marvel. CTP of Refinement is basically just a predecessor to the CTP of Regen, which we're moving on to next. Not many people like the CTP of Refinement. It is known as the CTP of Egg. CTP of Regeneration is basically just a better version of the CTP of Refinement, as it gives your character a max HP bubble, max HP, and it also gives them a heal, which is super great for PvP. CTP of Rage, as we talked about, is the best option for ABX, and just increasing your character's damage flat out. CTP of Greed is mostly a PvP CTP, as it basically increases your character's damage against all the other types by, I think it's 150%, but I'm not quite sure. But it is super great for PvP, so ideally if you have a tier 3 G that you're using for PvP, you want to stick this on her. CTP of Insight is mostly just a support CTP, as it helps increase your damage dealt to, I think, supervillains and superhero types by 50% or 150%, I can't quite remember off the top of my head. And for the chance up CTP, which is why it's not with the others at the minute, is the CTP of Judgment. This you want to give to elemental characters. As you can see, the stats on it is basically activate, increase all damage dealt, all elemental damage dealt by 200%. So that basically means in the stats page where you see fire damage, poison damage, cold damage, all the other kinds of damage that are elemental, it will increase that by 1. So it's basically just a damage proc for elementals, which is, pretty great. Now, there are 3 more CTPs that I didn't mention in the last list, and that is because they are technically free-to-play CTPs, so at least 2 of them are, and then one of them you should probably just forget exists. First off is the CTP of Transcendence. Now, this is such a common misconception that needs to be said. This is like a PSA to all new players. Do not equip this on high damage dealing characters. Just because it says all attack does not mean it's good. You want to put this on characters that have summons, i.e. Loki, Crescent, anyone that has a summon, i.e. it begins with an M, the Black Bolt's brother, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, him, just as they have summons, you want to put this on them. CTP of Patience is very similar. It's just a more offensive version of the CTP of Transcendence. So you want to be putting this on characters like Corvus Glaive or Ebony Maw, or, you know, people that can take a lot more hits. And last, we have the CTP of Veteran. I said forget this because it can only be acquired on the Collector's Vault, and like probably at least maybe 10 people have this, and that's it. There's only 10 of these in the game at the minute. There's very few people have this, so just forget it exists is what I'm saying, guys. And finally, we've come to uniforms. Uniforms are such a vital part of this game. Uniforms basically can take horrible characters such as Hawkeye, Ghost Rider, or Punisher, as he is here. I call him Ghost Rider because, you know, the skull and the flames. Red Skull, Storm, Star-Lord, Winter Soldier, Captain Marvel. They can make so many characters go from terrible tier to some of the best characters in the game, because they can change skills, they can change passives, and they can also, you know, they can just improve characters because of the bonus stats. Now, when I say bonus stats, I basically mean that you rank up uniforms from normal to advanced to rare to heroic to legendary and then to mythic. Obviously, you can see here I don't have my Namor's uniform quite at mythic yet, but I do have all the options for the ones that I have unlocked, which is what I've opted to show you him. Now, options basically mean if you have other uniforms that are required for the uniform that you have, you can increase the uniform's value even more. So as you can see, for the first option, we'll always have these listed options here. You will always have attack speed, movement speed, skill cooldown, crowd control time, and dodge. The best options here, for say you have good cards, is either attack speed or dodge. Second is always an attack stat or HP. PvE bonuses, you want either the attack, and mostly for PvP, you're going to be wanting using HP. The third stat will always be recovery rate, ignore defense, skill cooldown, HP or attack speed. For this, you either want ignore defense, HP or attack speed on most characters. The last one that I have unlocked on Namor is either physical defense, energy defense, on defense, or dodge. If you're playing in PvP, I definitely recommend dodge, and same goes for PvE. I definitely still recommend dodge. It's a pretty useful stat to have. Now you might be saying, oh, well, what's the mythic option? Well, I'm going to show you guys. Mythic options on uniforms are super important as they're a pretty big stat. Physical attack, energy attack, all attack, crit rate, or crit damage. These are great, and I know it sucks that you're going to have to choose which one you want, but trust me, it's a great stat to have. Now, I will leave a link to Future Fight Flare, which is a website which will show you guys, you select the uniform that you want, and it will show you the options that are needed for the uniform, and also options that the uniform you've just bought are options for, if that makes sense. So yeah, I will leave a link to that in the description. Okay guys, moving on finally, we've got to talk about cards. And I hate to do it because the card system in this game is just god-awful. Until NetMobic changes it, we've just got to deal with it. So I'm going to list you guys the best free-to-play options for the cards and what the stats are you want on them. To reroll a card, you basically just have to use another 6-star card, which is super painful, I know, but hey, we've got to go with that. So yeah, I'm going to run down the top 5 cards free to play and the stats that you should probably have a roll on them. Let's go. Okay, number 1, we have Loki, Agent of Asgard, number 17. Super free to play friendly card. Most people have this card, super easy to farm. You guys know it. Now, basically, the way cards work is you'll have 2 fixed stat options. If it's a premium card, you'll have 3, but most cards will have 2, and then you'll have random options that can change every time you reroll a card, which is what makes the system awful. Now, the 4 bonus options you're going to want to go for on the Loki card is, for the first one, you're going to want to ignore defense. For the second one, you're going to want attack speed. For the third one, you want all defense. And then for the 5th one, you're going to want, I can't count, you're going to want, for the 4th option, you're going to want energy attack. Next up, we have the Loki number 2 card, which you get from the Legendary Battles just for having the Thor Ragnarok uniform at Heroic. You're going to want this, obviously, at highest quality as you get rolled, but for the stats, you're going to want a crit rate, crit damage, all attack, and it is a super free-to-play friendly premium card. After that, non-surprisingly, we have Loki number 1. For this, it is obtained through the Legendary quest again from Thor Ragnarok, and you're going to want the Loki Ragnarok uniform for it at Heroic to get this card. For this, you're going to want max HP, energy attack, all attack. Next up, we have another free-to-play friendly card. It is the Nebula Avengers card, or Avengers 318. For this, you're going to want to have obviously the 2 fixed stats as well as all attack, cooldown duration, crit damage, and energy attack. And finishing off the list at number 5, we have the Uncanny X-Men 2018, number 8, or the Bishop card. For the stats on this, you're going to want energy attack, cooldown duration, crit damage, and ignore defense. Now, obviously, as far as quality goes on the cards, you're probably going to want it. A lot of people will tell you that the quality of the card doesn't matter, it's just the stats that matter. But I would say, obviously, if you got the stats that you want, but the cards are quality 1, I'd say try and reroll it. You at least want a quality 3 on your cards. However, if you're really stuck between a rock and a hard place, quality 1 is fine. Now, the card system, most people hate. It's whatever. You can't really do anything about it. I'd love to be enthusiastic about it, but I just can't. It's just a really bad system. But those are the ideal cards for a pretty free-to-play option. You know, it's going to take you time to reroll them perfectly, but if you do, you should have perfect cards, basically. Or perfect basic cards, if that makes sense. But that's what you should be working towards. So yeah, guys, that's been my take on how to build a character, basically. And, you know, the things that you should do, the things that you shouldn't do. I hope this was a helpful video. I've done it because I think that a lot of people don't have the information that they need, and I will be coming at you guys again with the part 2 to this video, which I will be going into game modes and explaining how they work and some characters that you want and don't want for those game modes. And yeah, I will leave a link below to all of the helpful, you know, info guides, infographics, you know, anything that you guys may think is super important to have. So yeah, you guys can use this as a hub just to get all the links that you need. So that has been me. Don't forget, guys, again, I know I say this every video, but you guys should totally come and check me out. I stream every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday on Twitch at daily reset time. Feel free to come on over. The link is popping up on screen as we speak. Feel free to come on over and ask me any questions that you have about the game. I'm always happy to answer them. For now, that's going to be me. I'll be back at you again sometime soon. I promise, guys. Leave a comment below. Leave a like on the video. Make sure to tell me what you guys want to see next. Feedback, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.